Hi, my name is Sarah.
My name is Mujib.
And welcome to another episode of Let's Get to It. This is episode 29, and we're calling this episode Common Threads
Yeah, I like
of Humanity.
that.
Tag that trailer on right there.
Nice, perfect.
So we've been having, full disclosure, a lively pre-conversation discussion that's gone in multiple directions, as it should, because this is a big topic. It's a topic of importance to both of us, and I think we love to see what we all share, what we share as humanity, right?
Right. And it's such a broad, like, ephemeral topic at that, and I think that's why we've been jumping all over the place with it right now, because you have, like, what does that mean to that's the beautiful thing about, like, humanity, period, is like we have this common thread, but at the same time it's it is playing itself through everybody individually, you know what I mean? So, like, this topic of we're all connected, or this interconnectedness, might mean something different to me than it means to somebody who's sitting right next to me. They might agree with me, and say, like, yeah, no, we all are interconnected, like, let's do the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing, whatever. But at the same time, that might have a different response in them, in their internal dialogue, than it has in mine, than it has in yours, and it has in the next listener, so on and so forth. So I'm also fascinated by that, oftentimes, the different ways that we can interpret this very obvious fact that we're all so connected.
Yeah, and it speaks to, I was just looking up a statistic, and listeners may or may not realize this, that all human beings are 99.9% identical in their genetic makeup, but this 0.1% is a big deal, or has become a big deal. And especially, we're in such an era of identity politics where visibility matters, right? Centering folks that have not had their voices heard, or the visibility amplification is important. But it's also setting up people to sort of lead with certain identities. And I don't know if that obfuscates our similarities or commonalities. It's an interest. There's going to be a lot of opinions on this, as there should be. But it is important to feel those identities, because we're not living in a world that's equal.
Right.
We're not, right? That 0.1% has been is hierarchical, right, in the society that we, at least the one that you and I inhabit currently. So then that becomes important. It's so we don't, it's not to take away anyone's individuality at all, but common threads, at the end of the day, our needs and wants are very animalistic isn't the right word, but
Humanistic.
Humanistic. Thank you.
Right.
Was really trying to figure that one out.
But I mean, what it makes me think of is the fact that, like, we are all the facets that we inhabit on this world. Like, we had this discussion in the pre-conversation, and I think it's what makes me so inspired to live a more global existence, is because I'm not confined to the soil that I was born on. My ancestors are from all over the world, you know what I mean? And so for me, even just to try to trace my ancestry and go to every place that all of my different ancestors might have came from, that's going to take me all over the world. It's going to take me to different continents. It's going to take me to islands. It's going to take me, you know what I mean, to different hemispheres. And so to just say, like, okay, well, here's this box that was created by these psychos, and I'm gonna still live in this box. That's obviously not going to be the case, right? That you've heard enough from me in 29 episodes or 28 episodes to know that I don't subscribe to that. Right. But at the same time, I do feel confident and love the idea of living on this sphere,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
inhabiting this globe, you know what I mean, in this
Mm-hmm.
universe, and trying to see how it is that I look over from this perspective or from that direction, or how does my humanity play out in this place where they speak a completely different language and dialect and have a different culture.
Mm-hmm.
That I think is the beauty. Like when I think of common threads or commonalities, or this 99.9% similar or exact same DNA, identical DNA, that tells me that I need to know more about these other cultures because
Mm,
they are me, like I am
mhm,
them, you know what I mean? And
mm,
so it's not about trying to say like, okay, well, we're all the same. We don't need to see the differences.
mhm,
It says, no, we're all the same. Let me look at these differences and honor them and respect them
mm,
and give them a voice and give them space, you know what I mean? And try to continue to, in my life and in the life of people that I can influence, to kind of break down some of those walls that say, we need to just be in this box, in this shape, in this conformity that was created again by people who did not have our best interests in mind, because they didn't let our brothers and sisters and friends and lovers have a voice, you
mhm,
know.
mm.
So
I love that. And it's that celebration of that 1.1%
mhm,
and
mhm,
what we might be able to learn and all benefit from,
right.
you know?
Well, also I think it's the variety of that 99% though is, I think, maybe more of what I'm speaking to, because it's like we're on this planet, but if I only see the planet for the country that I'm in, you
Mhm,
know what I mean? So like
mhm,
if my whole planet is America, then I'm not acknowledging the rest of what the planet actually is, you know? But if I can see that the planet is a planet that consists of oceans and seas and continents and mountains and valleys and deserts, and you know what I mean, then I can start to understand that this one thing that we inhabit, that is Earth, has all of these facets. And we've had this conversation about relationships and communication, but that's also the same thing. Like if I look at you and I take our relationship as a stagnant thing,
mhm,
then I'm gonna miss you.
mhm.
Because you're gonna be somebody different in 5 minutes because
Right.
of all the things that you're taking in and that you're processing and that you're then coming back out with. Um, so again, when I say like honoring the culture, like I love the 0.1%, but I also want to acknowledge the full exploration of the fact that the 99% that makes us identical means that we are the same, and that's why it's important that this blonde-haired blue-eyed person has this conversation with this dark skinned nappy head person, like, because we are the same. We
Mhm,
need to be able to say like, you're a human being, I'm a human being, and you're a human being that looks like this, sounds like this, speaks like this, comes from this place. So you're representing humanity in the
mhm,
same way that I'm a human being that looks like this, sounds like this, and comes from this place, and I'm representing humanity. So let me get your story, because it's going to give me the other side of my story, which is going to
mm,
give me the better way to represent myself to either these next generations or whoever it is that we're influencing.
mm. I kept I was thinking that whole time of, when we think about the animal kingdom and the hierarchy of the animal kingdom, like the predators and prey, and stick with me.
Absolutely.
And we move into, right, human beings, and it's like we've tried to create a hierarchy among human beings where one shall not exist
Mhm, mhm.
because we are of the same species.
Right.
um and
Yeah.
it's, which is just like so messed up,
Mhm,
that this has been like the trajectory of humankind. um and I don't know, I was just kind of thinking on that, but I love this notion of a global citizen, and yet global movement is so heavily policed, and and the response, the clampdown is always so much harder, like when governments or countries take a nativist tone, or like, we don't want to let anybody else in, whether it's the United States' own immigration policies. There's plenty of
Yeah.
places around the world, right? And in Asia and Africa and the Middle East as well. Like no place around the world is exempt from sort of like, okay, we've got to keep our own and keep other people out. Um, and that's I think, what we're still up against.
Mhm.
Right? This sort of tightening of borders and building of walls, for what,
Right.
and it just seems like such an old school mentality,
Right.
like, that actually doesn't help anyone. um and like, what do we stand to gain by that, by like keeping people out? Like, I don't know, I'm definitely of the, I would, I want to live in multiple places. I need to speak more languages. It's, I think that the tragedy is for folks that don't get to experience a place outside their own localized way of being. um
Mhm. Mhm.
and perhaps if more people could travel, if that were more accessible, that we would think a lot differently,
Mhm.
about the world
Mhm.
we inhabit, about other people, because we tend to otherize people and places that we don't
Right.
know anything about.
Right. 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 I think that when I when I ask myself why why would I believe that these things are so heavily policed, or these borders are so thick and with razor wire and walls and guards and things like that, um, it makes me think of those similarities. Like if this person knows that they are exactly like this person who's coming across their border, then maybe it'll start to break down some of the things that they've been taught. We live in a country that was all about genocide and all about enslavement. And the biggest fear was that people were going to realize that the people that were getting killed and were getting enslaved are actually just like the people who are benefiting from the genocide and the enslavement. Um, and once that was the case, then all of these power systems and power structures were going to start to crumble.
Mhm.
And so, if power structure is what the I'm not going to say we, because I don't want to try to lump myself into that. But if power structure is what's trying to be up is it's what's trying to be upheld by these powers that be, then it doesn't make sense to try to let people in. It's like when you have a Muslim speak to a Christian for the first time, when that Christian has never assumed that Islam is anything like Christianity. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And like, I don't know if it sounds weird in 2021, especially from my own standpoint, to think like, does that even happen anymore? But it does. Like, there
Mhm.
still are
Oh yeah.
Christians that will talk to a Muslim and be like, "Y'all believe in Jesus?" And Muslims will be like, what have you been told about this religion? What have you been told
Mhm.
about, like, don't you understand Abrahamic religions mean
Mhm.
that we are all believing in the same thing? Like, we all come back to the same exact starting point. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And people are still baffled about that. But if people understand that Islam encompasses Christianity within its own religion, then that starts to erase Islamophobia. And if you erase
Mhm.
Islamophobia, then we start to erase certain levels of xenophobia that makes people be allowed to come in this country and take jobs and so on and so forth. And so, that's from across the world. Like, you're
Mhm.
not even talking about people that are on the same continent coming from Mexico, trying to come up here from Mexico to go to California. And
Mhm.
people are like, no, you don't belong here in New Mexico.
And
What?
it's this notion that it's fear based,
Mhm.
and this idea that when people cling so tightly to something where they think someone is coming to take something from me or change my way of life, or I don't know, whatever, it's, again, it's fear based.
Right.
Whether it's, this person's here to take your job. No, that's actually not true. This person's here to change religion and convert you. No, they just want to practice their beliefs. Like, so much of this is just, I believe this sort of the progressive mindset is just like, nope, we just want everybody in the sandbox.
Mm,
It's just more people in the sandbox, like,
right, right.
but how this often gets framed is like someone's going to take your guns and or
Mhm, mhm,
make you gay. I don't
right,
even know. Whatever and it just no, no, actually.
right. Really, we just
um
want less violence against people that don't need violence put on them. You know what I mean? Whether it's verbal violence, whether it's physical violence, whether it's emotional violence, like it's not that's not we don't need any more of that. We're not in the stick fight rock throwing way, you know what I mean? And so yeah, that's what we've been having this conversation a lot actually in my household about, what does it mean to give people rights over their gender identification or their sexual orientation. And it literally just means letting people do whatever it is that they want to do,
mhm.
right? And how does that become such an argument? Like what you just said, how does that become a defensible point? Like you this isn't even somebody trying to change anybody else's way of life. This is somebody trying to just live their own way of life.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so it just doesn't nothing because how's it going to affect the children, or what are they going to tell my wife when they come across that border about where their country is and what it's like there? You know what I mean? It's a I don't know. I'm off on a tangent now, just kind of digressing, but
No, I mean, I'm kind of picking up where you're going with this. It's sort of, it's like this fear that we might be exposed to more, and maybe we might even want whatever that more is.
right,
And I think people are really fearful of that. Like, you know, um, if oh well, if I expose my son to this kind of culture, like it's gonna turn him this way. Well, okay, maybe it does. Maybe your son is exposed to XYZ, fill in the blank, and decides for, God forbid, himself that, oh, maybe that interests me. Maybe
right,
I want to move to this place. Maybe I do want to practice this religion or learn this dance or sleep with this person.
mhm,
And what actually is so wrong with that? What is so wrong with an expansion of possibility
right,
and potential and
mhm,
human interconnectedness?
mm, mm,
And again, also, you and I talk about this all the time. I feel like it surfaces every time we get together and talk, is about self-discovery and
mhm,
knowing more about ourselves. And we've talked about this in sort of private discussions, but what the queer community has been able to do for the heteronormative community is expand our own notions of ourselves and our personal sexuality and so on and so forth. And it's through sometimes these, I don't like the term subculture because it just sounds hierarchical, right? So, but non-normative cultures or non-dominative cultures or ways of thinking being, right, actually helps the normative culture like open up a little bit.
right, right, right. I mean, it shows you how broad the spectrum actually is. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because if we're only shown like this part of the spectrum, and it's like like it was illegal for women to wear pants at some point.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so in this country, like that alone should let everybody know that anybody who's trying to live by some sort of standard that's been set by these people, that's enough to let you know, like, what the fuck is really actually going on out there. And I think that's what being able to embrace culture and being able to um, not restrict ourselves because of the people who are trying to restrict us. I feel that's what it does, is that it broadens the spectrum. And if I can be a hetero man that can do more than what a hetero man was supposed to be able to do a generation ago,
Mm.
um, again, that starts to disrupt the status quo. That's what I love.
Yeah.
That's what I love about being able to exist and to coexist. And that's why I love that people can have their own voices. I mean, again, it this generation we have our own fight. The last generation had had their Hold on. Yeah. No,
Is Zayd in proximity?
no, no, Kenzie's here.
Oh, hi.
Sarah says hi, Kenzie.
Hi.
Um,
I was
but
I was actually getting excited thinking like Zayd was gonna pop up from underneath
that
and
would have
say,
just come up from this. That would have been great. Um,
yes, we have a special guest today.
um, but no, so basically all I'm saying is like it goes back to what I was saying before about this the broadening of our own horizon. The 99.9% means that it's worth me going and trying to figure out how people live on the other side of the world. It's worth me going to figure
Mm.
out how people live on the other side of the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and sometimes we can't
Because
even seem to do that sometimes.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I don't just mean that. And that's where I got into the conversation before about like I do want to know what Tucker Carlson is saying. Like I do want to know what these people on the other side of the spectrum of where I am politically or emotionally. Like I
Mhm.
want to know what they're saying because we're 99.9% the same. If they've got these views, their views have to be representative of the same floor that I'm standing on too. And if I'm not paying attention to what they're saying, then I'm not paying enough attention to what else is going on. And I have my own like anybody else, I have the things that have been put on me and my constraints to break down. And it's not just like listening to right wing people talk about their right wing politics. It could have to do with me listening to a completely non binary person explain to me what it is that they're experiencing as a non binary person. Like that's not something that I experienced growing up. I
Mhm.
didn't have the benefit of having transitioning friends. I didn't have the benefit of having non-conforming friends when I was growing up.
Mhm.
So now as an adult to be able to engage with my non-conforming and my non-binary and my trans friends and family, um, it broadens my own horizons, to think like, wait, queer Muslim? Huh? I
Mhm.
never even thought that was a thing that we could even talk about. But now you can talk about that. You know what I mean? Because somewhere on the other side of the world, there's a Muslim woman being like, wait, Muslim woman without a scarf on?
Mhm.
I never even imagined that. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And so again, it's if we're only shown this much of the spectrum, somebody starts showing us this much more of the spectrum, and we start seeing this much more, and then it realizes like, oh shit, it loops around. It's
Well,
around the globe.
it breaks the matrix.
Hmm.
The more that we can see, the more alike we are in terms of the common threads thing. Like it and when I say breaks the matrix, I mean it sort of breaks up the power structures to keep people in line. You know,
Right,
if you can only check, if there are only two boxes to check,
right,
you're like, well, I don't know though. I'm gonna make a third box,
right.
right? And it takes people to step out and create that and lead that and blaze that trail, and the rest of us start going, oh, okay, yeah, oh wait, there's more than two boxes,
Hmm.
okay, or whatever, whatever it is,
Right, right, right.
um you know yeah. And yeah, I just think too also, again, mainstream Western media in particular, and the fear mongering, only showing particular images and sound bites depending on, where in the world that coverage is happening.
Mm,
So you start to develop this monolithic understanding, at not necessarily any fault of anyone, in the beginning, right? Like if you've only been shown like five pictures your
mhm.
entire life, and then suddenly someone passes you a different book and is like, look at all these 100 pictures though, this also happens there, and you're like,
Right.
oh shit. It's and then when you have that information, then what are you going to do with it? And I think
Mm,
we're definitely in a time right now, and we've talked about this before, but in this sort of, if local awakening, national awakening, global awakening, you know, when you can't unsee the things that you've seen or unknow the things that you know, or now you're in a process of unlearning, or being like, oh, wow, the system is really messed up. Like, now what is the charge? What are we going to do
mm, mm.
to keep moving in this broader direction of inclusivity, more people at the table, global citizenry? What's the move, you
Right.
know? um, or what can we do in our daily practices or our own spheres of influence, because it can feel super massive. It can feel, when you look at the sort of the matrix or the big system, and you can feel so defeated at the end of the day,
mm,
when you do go down Twittersville or you're doom scrolling, and it's just like, oh my God, I just feel so tired and exhausted, and what are we gonna do?
mhm,
Um, but it's like, okay, just making small headway, expanding your own network. I don't necessarily have the answer.
right. I mean, those sounds like that sounds like two examples of what you might do yourself, you know what I mean? And I think that if we if every individual talks about what they do for themselves to try to do that, then again we'll hit those common threads. Oh damn, I do that too. Or oh, I didn't think about that, but I might like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like again, it's just like you said, we all want those humanistic things. We all have humanistic needs.
Hmm.
And so if my needs aren't getting met, but your needs are getting met, maybe we can cross level a little bit. Maybe you can let me know how you're meeting some of your humanistic needs. And if I'm not meeting my needs in those same ways, maybe that'll clue me in on how to meet those needs myself. You know what I mean? And
Mm.
um, I think it takes that. I think it takes realizing that there's that common thread and beating that fear voice down that's embedded in us all, or we're surrounded by, that says like, no, this if you go that way, then you're not going to succeed. If you go that way, then you're going to live in destitution, or you're going to be outcast, or nobody's going to like you. There's nobody else like you on the world,
Mm.
and
Mm.
that's you talk about social media and the Twitter, like the doom scrolling and twittering. And I was saying in the pre-conversation, like that's one of my favorite things about those social media platforms, is that it 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 lets you know that you're not the only one. You know what
Right.
I mean? You're not the only person that's feeling dysphoria. You're not the only person that feels alone where you are. You're not the only person that is black and is only around white people and has only been around white people for this long. Like that's somebody else's experience too, and this is how they dealt with it. And
Mm.
so here, here's an option. Here's a way that you can plug into that.
Mm.
Um, so it's I don't I say all that to say that again it goes back into broadening. It's realizing that like maybe nobody will actually put that book in front of you that says there's 95 other pictures that you haven't seen yet, but there is a book out there that will show you that there's 95 other pictures, and you should go and find it, because there's more to the story. And I'm talking to everybody at this point, but definitely it it seems that the person who hasn't considered any of these ideas and that thinks that like the way that they're living is just the only way that they can live, like you said, like if you don't think that you can even cut your hair or change your body or modify yourself, then maybe somebody telling you like I did that, I do that, I've done that, I'm going to do that, I'm in the process of doing that, this is how you can do it too.
Mm.
um, then maybe that person's never really realized that there are those options for them, or there is that community that's just waiting for you to
Mm.
jump into, you know.
When I think about when I was hearing you talk about, the realization that you're not the only one,
Mm,
kind of, um, and that just really speaks to a need for connection, which I think is part of being a human being, part of the human species. What's been, difficult about the last year of most of our lives is, um, lacking, to the degree that feels nurturing and necessary, human connection,
mhm,
human touch, more than just, you know, a Zoom call or a masked encounter. Um, and yeah, I just think connection is so important, but like, then connection to whom? Like, how can we continue to feel connected to our brethren, brothers and sisters from around the world, and not just necessarily strictly identity politics, or strictly, does this, strict tribalism, if you will, like, at face value, like, are these my people? And that's why actually I do love that, like, the humanness of your, when you talk about like, yeah, I am going to listen to the Tucker Carlson because 99.9%, why wouldn't I? Or when you've spoken about some of the books that you were reading, right, previously, to sort of get in the mind, understand like, what is the conversation on the other side? Well, how did these folks get to where they're at?
Right, right, right,
Emotions
right.
are running high. What's going on that these folks are over here
Right.
and these folks are on this side? And I think that is like, that just speaks to like, that is the goal. I feel like that is the goal. Like, it is just it's such a love thy brother. I mean, it's kind of giving it a little religious taste, but it's such a like, I don't it's from a place of compassion and like just this, I don't know. I really respect it.
Mm.
Is what I'm trying to say. I
Well,
really respect it.
for me, I mean, not I wish, but I'm not gonna. It's not as there's not that much humility to it. Like the way that you said it was just beautiful, and it made me really seem like I'm, like I really am trying to be accepting in my life by looking at these things. But like I wanted to understand. So what you're speaking to, just so the listener can understand a little bit more. Like really started to around probably early fall of 2020 started to really become interested in the Civil War and like what led to, not what led to the Civil War, but what was being talked about around that time period,
Mhm.
because there was obviously this discourse that was happening. And I read Frederick Douglass, I've read John Brown, I've read all these accounts from the standpoint of the abolitionist.
Mhm.
I love those stories, and that's always been. And in the 60s again, like when you get into the 20th century, that's always the side that I was about. Like I'm the son of revolutionaries, and that's what I'm well versed in the our struggle and how we got to this point. But I wasn't well versed in, well, what was the opposition saying, or what else was being said that had people in such a way ready to die for this, and like we were listening to something the other day, um, and they were talking about the South and where the Europeans who came into the South were coming from, like the people that settled Kentucky and such, and how they came from like the Highlands of Scotland, and they
Mhm.
were like Scotch Irish, you know what I mean? And they were used to being, they were like clanning, like feuding clansmen, essentially. So when they got here, they carried on that way of life,
Mhm.
I'm gun down my neighbor, die like a man, like your brother did, you know what I mean? That sort of mentality.
Mm.
And so you have this like Southern chivalry that comes up. And I said to her, I said, that's why motherfuckers were running through the swamps in Louisiana barefoot trying to fight for slavery when they didn't even own slaves, trying
Mm.
to fight for states' rights when they weren't even benefiting from any of the states' rights, right?
Mhm.
Because that's the mind frame of somebody. That's somebody's ancestry, is that you go and you fight for your flag, you fight for your clan, you fight for your place. If you don't know that that's the people that are standing up against you, ready to blow up some building or tear down some capitol, then it's going to be a surprise when it happens. But
Mhm.
if you
Mm.
if but when I looked at the insurrection, when I looked at January 6th, 2021, and I saw those Confederate flags flying, and I saw those guys looking like they came from the mountains, and mountain men looking people coming down with furs on them and stuff like that, I'm like, I just read that book. I know what that is, I've made myself aware that this is the
Yeah.
standpoint of these people, this is the viewpoint of these people, and I don't sympathize with them.
Mhm.
I'm just more aware of them,
Right.
and that's my own growth though. That's my own personal growth. Like I said, I've got my own walls and barriers to break down.
Mhm.
That says, like it's like the if we use biblical. It's funny, like we're using a lot of biblical terminology, but
Right.
neither of us are like well versed in the Bible or
I
anything. But it's
know.
just like
Full
this is,
disclosure, I am
yeah,
not an
totally.
authority on the Bible.
Right, not at all.
Last
This is
person
all
asked.
pop culture references at
Right.
this point. But
Right.
that whole idea of like love thy neighbor,
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out how.
Mm.
Like if there's a higher power or a higher wisdom that's saying you're supposed to understand how you're all unified. How do you all, where's the common thread? That's what
Mhm.
I'm looking for.
Mhm.
Where's the common thread? If
Mhm.
we're all humans on this planet and the only way that we're going to be able to go forward is to give everybody a voice, and I'm damn sure going to hold down some space so that my brethren on this side can have a voice.
Mhm.
Why do you need a voice too on that other side?
Mm.
What's the point of that? What are we supposed to be learning from y'all?
Mhm.
Because it's easy for me to say that y'all are only, not y'all like you, but it's easy for me to say like the right wing or the right is supposed to be learning from us
Mhm.
because we obviously understand how to love our neighbor, right?
Mhm.
My neighbor doesn't look anything like me, and I fucking love them. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Um, maybe it's obvious for me to be like, you're supposed to learning this from us, but what am I supposed to pick up from this situation? I don't know yet. So that
Mm.
is that's where I'm at with that.
Right. And I mean, there's definitely going to be folks that say nothing. They need to shut up.
Right, right.
They've had the mic for a long time. They can
Mhm,
shut the fuck
mhm,
up now.
mhm. Right,
There's that too.
totally.
But and that kind of gets to the when I was sort of throwing those accolades in terms of the compassion piece, like, and not in any way that you're giving a pass or condoning or any of this stuff, but
Right,
sort of
right,
the approach is still like trying to understand,
right,
trying to make sense. Is there sense to be made?
right,
You know? And I think too about, this we were talking, I think it was the pre-conversation we were talking about everybody was a baby at some point,
right, right,
and then so we've got the nature versus nurture aspect and there something has gone wrong with the nurturing
right,
because nature tells us that we're 99.9% alike, so the nurturing's gotten really fucked.
right, right. I mean, it goes, fuck yeah, fuck yes, absolutely. And you can see in this country, you can see it because, like, take us back to like 1717, right? And you gave a dark skinned African person a light skinned European baby. They're probably gonna take care of the baby. They're definitely not gonna drown that baby.
Mhm.
They're not gonna kick the baby around the fucking world. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But in that same time period, you give a light skinned European person a dark skinned African baby, and we're not gonna have that same conversation now,
Mhm.
right? As far as the majority goes,
Mhm.
right? The majority of people are gonna do a lot of fucking burnt shit to that baby.
Mhm.
And if that baby lives to be a human adult, they're gonna do some burnt shit to that adult too.
Mhm.
And so that that's this country is built on that. So you're still gonna see that same thing. Like people, like I have a European descent wife, right? Like we're married, we're a multicultural family, whatever, multicultural American family. Like I look at my son and I say, like, you're like the true American. You know what I mean? You're like every culture of that would represent what America is actually representative of is in this child up to now. Like obviously, like from going forward, we're going to have even more cultures that are going to bleed into what makes America America, so on and so forth, quote unquote America. Um, but my point in saying that is like, I grew up in a place where like we always had like white friends or whatever. We had Caucasian or European people around us because my mom would be like, and people might ask my mom like, "Oh, y'all bring that white boy around again?" You know, "Yeah, of course I am. Like, why not? He's a human being. Maybe he's gonna learn something from us.
Mhm.
Maybe he's going to pick something up from from being with us, from being around culture. It's like what you just said. Like folks have had the mic enough. Like I know enough about that culture. You know what I mean? That culture doesn't necessarily, because I was taught that culture in high school and history books. That's the only history I was taught was
Right.
from that standpoint of that culture. And so, for me, I think a lot about that that nature versus nurture is
Mm.
also can happen in our adult life, in our adolescent life, in our prepubescent life. Like, I don't know. I don't, but again, I come from Montgomery County, Maryland, and Montgomery County, Maryland is very is very interwoven and mixed between cultures and complexions, you know, of human
Mm,
beings.
mm,
Um, that's it might be different in Southeast DC, you know,
mm,
might be a
mhm.
little bit harder to hear that.
Yeah. No,
But
I think.
again, you're not going to see white people stomped out just for being white.
Mm,
That's not what we do.
mhm. And yet the other way around is not so inviting.
Right,
And that's just still the truth,
right, right.
you know.
Yeah.
I've talked with you personally about my experience of going to Iran, and which is incredible,
Mm,
beautiful place, and having never felt so welcomed, and embraced. And again, this idea that, on the national megaphone, you're hearing like the axis of evil and being told all these things. And these people hate you. They hate Americans. They hate your guts, right? All this like fear mongering. And if you're lucky enough to go to one of these forbidden places,
mm,
you realize that's a friggin' lie,
right.
you know? Um, like most of what we're told or what we've been told. Um, so yeah, I think about, being on the, being welcomed into a place of where language is a barrier and culture is different, and just feeling so welcome, as if some, taken care of, um, and then just being able to observe and be part, and listen and learn and eat.
Mm, mm,
Eat a
mhm,
lot.
mhm,
Um, and it's a beautiful thing, what a gift. Like I don't if you've never been the only in a place, like you should make it a point to try to be the only.
mm,
I think it's really important. I think it's important to put yourself in a place if possible where, you know, maybe you don't look like anybody else, or you don't actually speak the language, or you don't identify. um like, what do you stand to learn? What do you stand to gain by listening? By, what do you stand to learn about the common thread? That was, on my first, I don't know, first or second night when we were at my boyfriend's family's home. Like, we ordered pizza, right? Pizza night. I'm like, oh, okay, pizza night. I'm in Tehran. Yes, there's a lot of pizza there. If you didn't
mm.
know, now you know. They do put some ketchup on pizza as a thing. Wasn't my thing, but you know what? It doesn't have to be exactly the same. But yeah, this idea of common thread,
Right,
because we are globalization, the ability to travel, technology, all of these things has made the world actually small. It's amazing when you kind of think about, how many times in your life can you think of those times where like you meet somebody in some random place. I feel like I've heard stories from you, right?
yeah.
And sudden you're like, oh my, like, that guy? How do you know that guy? Like, you live halfway
Mhm,
around the world and we're in this other place, and I don't, it's just, we are in a small planet.
right, right,
Um, so yeah, another reason to just be a good freaking person.
right.
Because
True.
chances are, like, that's like your sister's uncle's kid, or I don't know. I think they're still related that way. I don't know. Um, I don't. Yeah, I just can't think of a reason not to be. But that's
Right.
the frustrating thing. I think for some, it's just like, I don't know, like kindness just does, like, it just seems so obvious. Like, sometimes I don't understand why it's so hard
Mm, mm,
when and this is a total pivot here, but we'll take it. When I think about what it even means to lead an organization or be a boss, to lead people, again, to interact with other human beings. And, there's so many examples of bad behavior and bad bosses and people taking advantage of other people. And, what is it about that is either inscripted in our DNA or is part of humanity as well? It's got to be, right? Like it has to be this idea of, I don't know. Um, and on the other side, I'm like, is it really that hard to compliment people? Is it really that hard to give people a chance to have the floor and listen? Is it really that hard to, but I mean, apparently it is.
Right.
Apparently it is. But, I think of little things that we can do, and these, people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be respected, feel have dignity and be loved. I just feel like it is just and when we all want these things. The Tucker Carlsons of the world want that too, not necessarily willing to give it to everybody, but
Right.
they
Right. Right.
want it, So like what is that? We actually all do want very similar things, right? In those pillars, but we seem at I'm saying we, but like folks can become incapable of being able to give that back.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Totally. Totally. Because
Uh,
I think that we all do it in some way to someone in some form or another.
yeah.
And, I think that the biggest, hardest thing for even myself as the person that I am is to realize um, that this other person who I'm so willing to other uh, is still a human being on this planet that was born a cute little baby that was next to somebody else that, you know what I mean, that had all the same shit going on. And so, um, not to say that I can easily, I can name plenty of people that I don't want to sit down with and have a conversation with. I can name plenty of people who I don't appreciate, respect, or give any sort of credence to the way that they think. And whenever, you know, make the mistake of giving them power over me, uh, physical or otherwise. Um, but in that, I don't write their children off. I don't write off
Mm,
their grandchildren. You
mhm,
know, maybe I think that that person is fucked, but I don't have a lack of faith that says that 6 generations from now they're still definitely going to be fucked.
mm,
You know,
mhm,
because again, there's plenty in this country that people don't want to admit what side their family was on at what point in time.
mhm,
And there are some people who can admit that and can come to terms with that and can say like, no, you're right, like I need to stand up and talk about what I represent and talk
mhm,
about what my history tells me that I was part of and atone or make peace or at least acknowledge.
mhm,
Um and so yeah, so I know that everything can change. I know that there are plenty people rolling over in their graves right now for the shit that their successors and their ancestors are doing in this day and
mm,
age.
mhm,
So I'm not going to say that the David Dukes of the world and such are doomed 10 generations from now. I can't write their 10th generation off. I might not ever want to sit next to David Duke's son,
mhm,
you know, but maybe his grandson changes the fucking whole story.
mhm,
Maybe not. Maybe it's his great grandson or his great grandson's great grandson. I don't know. But I think that when I talk about faith, that's what it comes down to. Is like I don't know.
mm, mhm,
All I do know is that it will continue to go in the direction that it's obviously supposed to go into. And if you know, I it's like, and this is a whole different conversation to have at that. But um, we were having a conversation here at home about the world and the way that it is in perfection, right? And my wife says like, well, what about rape and genocide? And I was like, yeah, obviously, like in that moment, that's fucked up. But I know enough people who have made it to the other side of those situations that affect the whole world based on who they become on the other side of that situation.
mm,
How many people end up not having to be martyred because of this martyr? You know what I mean? How many things change? Like I was talking about the Me Too movement, like The Me Too movement was started by a black woman who was like, enough of this shit. Like, let's talk about who else can stand up in this room now. And now, 20 years later, people are like, I can stand up.
Mm-hmm.
I can stand up. I can stand up. And that's a result of this woman's shitty experience. That's a result of this woman's the shit that was done to this person,
Mm-hmm.
is making sure that the shit doesn't continue to happen.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about George Floyd, when I think about, I just, that's what I keep thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
is like, maybe these people die now so that my grandchildren don't have to keep dying, because there are reforms that actually happen because people actually start having these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that I want to see another black man dead on the news at all. I don't want to see that. It doesn't mean that I want to be the next black man shot dead on the news.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but that's not my decision ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
If Dante Wright could decide that he didn't want to die on the news, then he would, you know, and that's how it rocks. But let's hope that some of these things that we're seeing on television and these atrocities that we're witnessing are making people wake up again, and see that there's still work to do, and that the world still can change for the better, and that we do still have these common threads, because everybody who's getting tear gassed in Minneapolis right now is every shade of fucking human being that you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all crying and they're all choking on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, common thread.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when I think about commonality, that's where my mind goes with it in this day and age. And that's why I'll give, that's why I'll not just turn the channel or flick off or keep scrolling if I see some shit that I might not want to hear, you
Mm-hmm.
know. It still might piss me off, right? Like, I'm watching the Derek Chauvin trial, like, whenever the defense stands up, I don't just change it.
Right.
I want to hear what they're saying. What are they saying? How
Mm-hmm.
are they trying to justify this?
Right.
Because there's a millions and millions of people that agree with them that are also trying to justify it. And
Mm-hmm.
those people are behind me in the coffee shop. They're serving me at the grocery store. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
need to know, for myself to be able to raise my children so that they understand. I need to know a little bit more about what's being said and who's saying what.
There's this, you know, hope and faith. I think it's like to keep going,
Mm,
there has to be this hope and this faith that there's a purpose to it all.
right, right,
Because
right,
I think, like, the deepest well and depth of despair is that it's senseless and purposeless and that nothing changes as a result.
right.
Like, that is the absolute worst place to be. So, and I know we've talked about this before, that, the work that has to be done or is worth doing, like you and I at our age, at 37, 38, may not see the fruits of that struggle. But for Zaid to experience it, his children to actually live in a world that looks like one we're talking about right now, right? That's like there's purpose in that. There's meaning in that. Like, it's like, yeah, it's worth doing, to and it takes, yeah, you it takes the ability to think outside of yourself and your present circumstances, right? You have to think beyond that, generationally speaking. Like, um even to move it from a, like, planetary sustainability. You can continue to trash the world, but anything that you're doing today, whether it's composting or recycling, like, this is for your kids and your kids' kids. It's like, can we, it has to mean something. Like, I don't know. I mean, I can, I can, literally hear, I can hear the pain. It's like, this fucking has to mean something.
Mhm,
There has to be a purpose to all this fucking shit,
right.
you know? Um, because otherwise it's like, you can't let yourself think that there's not,
Right.
because
Right.
that's the end.
Hmm.
I really feel like you like can't go there. It's like, no,
Right.
I don't know.
That's for me. That's why I'm so grateful that my folks raised me with faith in my
Hmm.
life, and I don't just mean like religious faith. I mean like a true on like, hey, this is what it was like when we were born. This is the world that we were born into,
Mm.
and this is the world that you're born into. Let me tell you about the world your grandfather was born into. Doesn't that sound different to you?
Yeah.
How do you feel about the world that you're born into right now? What are you going to do going forward? Are we going to acknowledge that even this country alone, but let's think globally, are we going to acknowledge that all of this happened before, and has shifted and changed, and these colonizing powers have had to leave these places, and these people have returned back to their natural religion, and these people have turned back to their natural way of life, and this whole sect of humans is able to now identify themselves as they need to? Or are we going to not acknowledge the struggle? That are we not acknowledging where we are right now in the struggle? you know are we It's, if you can acknowledge where we are right now in the global struggle, then we can see that there's something brighter to look forward to.
Mm.
But if we can't acknowledge where we actually are in the global struggle, then maybe we're not, again, we're looking too narrow. We're not broadening our horizon enough. We're not widening the spectrum
Mm.
enough.
Hmm.
You know,
And
somebody
that,
might say nothing's changed, but then if you say nothing's changed, then you're not paying enough attention.
mm. And the act of just truly looking in the mirror, right? And the act
Mm,
of, you do. We've talked about this personally before, but for anyone that got caught up in saying, "Oh, this isn't us. This isn't America," whether it was Trump really narrowly being defeated, let's be honest, and the insurrection of the Capitol, and when I say folks, I mean mostly white folks saying, "Oh, this isn't us. This doesn't." No,
mm,
it is. It is, and you have to come to terms with that
mm,
it's ugly and it's nasty and it's but okay, like, and you want to change it. There, we can do better. But to like you said, to just, if we turn the channel off, you know, when Chauvin's attorneys start talking, like to deny that reality, to deny that folks are saying the things that are being said, whether it's coming out of Fox News or Trump or whoever, your uncle, um, is to deny reality, is to deny a half this country, which, again, look at the election. It wasn't a slam dunk. People didn't rally around Biden. We're like, yeah, that was not, I mean, I think a lot of us were like holding our breath for a week.
right.
It was not a done deal. It was not in the bag. And as many of us, especially, white, progressive, left leaning people, wanted to think that it would be like, okay, yeah, we're all like awake and let's have our kumbaya moment.
Mm,
No, we're not
no.
there. Doesn't mean we won't get there, but we're not
Mhm,
there today. Doesn't mean we haven't made progress, to your point, because we have, obviously, but, there's still a lot of acknowledgement to be done. And you've got to look at the skeletons in the closet.
right. The body's on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
it takes that. So,
And for me, it takes that common thread again. Is like this whole time that we've been talking about like the modern martyr, right?
mhm.
I think about somebody had to ask like, how would it feel if I watched my daughter get sprayed by a fire hose? Before they were like, no, I'm gonna go down there and march on Selma with those folks. You know,
Mhm.
like how would it feel if I woke up one day and my son said that he got his head cracked in just from walking down the street? Damn, maybe I should be paying a little bit more attention to what's going on, you know?
Mhm.
And we said it in this generation. How would I feel if you didn't tell me one in every three women is raped, and I'm going to be able to look at the three women around me and pretend like I didn't just hear what you just told me?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, that's not. So again, it just takes that. And for me, I'm asking, like, well, if that's the case, then how many of these motherfuckers around me are raping people?
Mhm.
And what's the conversation I need to be having with them? What are
Mhm.
the conversations that we need to be having? Like, it's like what you just said. Like, maybe it's your uncle that you're not having the political conversation about because you don't want to fuck up dinner or something like that.
Right.
Maybe you need to fuck dinner up if your uncle's a fucking asshole, a piece of shit or whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
Mhm.
I don't know. But that's where I go with it because, and I don't mean to say that to write that uncle off for being a piece of shit. Like, I need to know you're my, in that situation, that's my literal blood.
Mhm.
I got family members that feel different about things that I feel a certain way about.
Mhm.
And when it's time to breach that conversation and have those hard conversations, we get into it. We get as far into it as we can. And then we step back and let ourselves get to the point where we can digest the other person's perspective. And then we get into it again.
Mhm.
And that leads to our own perspectives being open to shift so that when the seas part, right? When some act of God or some body's identification comes through, well, we've already had these conversations. Now you get to decide
Mm.
what you're going to do about it. And so all these conversations about people wanting to be woke or wanting to do something for the people of color, the BIPOC communities, and things like that. Um, well, there's another body on the floor. How do you feel about that?
Mhm.
This could have been your brother. This could have been your friend. You just made a friend with that guy Dante. This could be him.
Mhm.
You just decided to donate blindly to this black cause. Well, that could have been her.
Mhm.
How do you feel about that actually?
Mhm.
Does that just make you want to donate again, or do you want? Is it time to now have these deeper conversations with your folks and try to figure out where they stand? Do we have a commonality enough to be able to say, like, I know how I can write off this whole branch of people,
Mm.
so maybe I can understand their concept or their standpoint a little bit more. Maybe I don't need to just write them off. Maybe I need to hear what they're saying, even if I don't agree with it at all, even if it makes me sick to listen to, even if it fucks with me to hear it. It's gonna fuck with me regardless because it's either fucking with me and my perspective or it's
Mhm.
fucking with my situation. It's
Mhm.
either I'm paying attention to the fact that I'm standing in 9 feet of muck, or I'm not.
Mhm.
And it's either I know that I'm standing in the muck, but I don't know what the contents of the muck are, or I'm going to try to figure out what the contents of the muck actually are, so that
Mhm.
I can do something about it. You know, something like that. I don't know. I'm still a person on my journey trying to figure it out.
Yep. Right here. I think too, even to bring up the conversation or the hypothetical Thanksgiving meal or whatever, like it's a mark of privilege to be able to say, we're not going to talk about it.
Mm,
Like we're not going to talk, we're not going to bring politics into it, right? That's such code fucking word. Like we're not going to talk politics. Like, and I think, I'm speaking for white people, like white privilege being able to hide behind that. It's uncomfortable. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to give that, again, denying its existence perpetuates the system. And
mhm,
to have the conversation is an acknowledgement that things are as fucked up as they actually are. And then you're faced with the like, okay, now that you know this, are you comfortable living in this society or not? Um, and that's it. Just like you said, what's or what's the move? Are you
right.
expanding your circle or you know the people that you're interacting with and talking to? Because when we do that, god forbid, that also extends our sense of empathy and connection. you know if I don't feel connected to Dante Wright, I can go off on my business, have my cooking show, like whatever, what's it to me? doesn't affect me, right? If I feel connected to this human being who was senselessly murdered for an air freshener, which is not illegal, right? Like, if I feel that connection, I might fucking damn well do something about it. And that's the power structure doesn't want us to have these conversations and connections and realize, like, oh, we do have common cause. We're on the same team here. That's scary for people who want to maintain the system that benefit from the system. So, common thread.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Right, right.
You know, care. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Think globally,
Mhm.
think globally and think locally and think personally and think culturally, like, I don't know, there's the whole story, like, not one of us has the whole story. So if you want to know the whole story, we got to look in all the different cracks and crevices and try to figure that out. If, I mean, that's how I feel. That's not my order to anybody. That's not even my advice to anybody. I'm just letting you know what my own personal experience is.
Mhm.
That if 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 my time on this earth is going to be to try to gather as much information as I can and pass on as much information as I can before I'm done on this earth, then I'm going to try to soak it up and to try to bring in as much as I can about the time that I live in,
Mm.
what led to it and what it might lead to, so I can give my folks some fucking ammunition or some peace of mind or some wisdom like my folks did for me,
Mhm.
you know.
And I think there's a sense too that, you know, is it if it's possible to leave the world in a better place than how you found it or when we entered it. You know, when we entered into this world in 1983, you know, what can we do to help make it a better, more equitable place by the time we're not walking on it anymore? That's a good life. I don't know. That's a meaningful life. Or one way to look at it. But, oh man, well, that was heavy.
Yeah.
How's everybody doing out there? Are you okay?
Right, right.
It's a
Yeah.
conversation worth having.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, and remember the love in it all, I mean,
mhm,
that's the root of it all,
mhm.
is allowing everybody to actualize, you know.
Yes.
This is allowing everybody to figure it out, and if we can help make some space for each other, then make some space for each other. If we can help to give the floor to each other, then give the floor to each other. Like, that's what this whole conversation is about, and
Mhm,
that's why we deserve opportunity to just live fully who we
mhm.
are and to experience the full spectrum of humanity, you know. There might be one side that's more colorful and funner and everything like that, and that's where you'll find me, you know what I mean? But
Yes.
you'll find me looking at the other side too, trying to figure out what it is, because I know in my own growth process, I was not this far on this side of the spectrum,
Mm,
you know. I may have started a little bit more neutral.
mm.
Um, I don't know. We all started from zero. That was a baby. And figure
Exactly.
out how to get here.
We all started from zero. I think but this is a great way to end because your evolution is possible.
Mm.
It's totally possible. So, yeah. Open up, let it in. And oh man, I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too, for sure.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for everything today.
Mm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I think this is going to be a really pivotal, important episode for people.
Mm. I hope
So
so.
yeah. Oh, we want to thank you for listening, and I hope this helps to stimulate conversation in your own life, in your own sphere of influence, and yeah, strike it up as one of my favorite Black Box songs. Strike it up. We'll end on that amazing note.
Nice. Awesome.
All right. Thank you guys. This has been another episode of Let's Get to It. Thank you so much. My name is Sarah.
My name is Mujib.
Take care. Almost forgot how we ended that thing.